Well, hello, and welcome to another bonus episode of Board with Each Other. We are the review podcast that looks at board games through the lens of playing as a pair. So your BFF, your significant other, or perhaps that robed, shrouded figure that stood outside the tube station handing out pamphlets on the esoteric order of Dagon.
Hey, everybody needs a hobby, all right? I said I'd be home within an hour, and I was.
So for those of you who have dumped at least a couple of stats into perception, you will notice that I am not your usual host. But don't worry, your usual host, Al, is here, so you're not going to miss out on his witticisms and clever
Incredible banter, charismatic overload. No, nobody misses me, love, carry
on. Say hello, Al.
Hello.
And I will be your host for this evening. My name's Hannah. So this is, as I said earlier, a bonus episode, and that's because we are reviewing a game that is no longer in print. It's something I'm very excited to be talking to you about. It is the absolute beast that is Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. So this isn't a podcast to teach you how to play games, and I'm quite thankful for that, because it's definitely probably up there with one of the more complicated things.
No, Hannah, I need you to explain all the rules. We're all counting on you. We believe in you. Right. This is going to be a 4-hour podcast, by the way.
So what we'll do is we'll just give you, or I will give you a relative sort of overview and kind of take you through a turn so you kind of get the gist of how things are played. But this is by no means a teach or a learn to play session. I guess at its heart, it is a dungeon crawler.
Yeah, kind of. An adventure.
With an RPG element to it?
Yeah, adventure, dungeon crawler, very thematic, things on a map kind of thing.
You will take the role of an investigator, or in our case we play double-handed, so we each take 2 investigators. And your investigators are travelling through Arkham, so not Batman's Arkham, but in fact Lovecraft's Arkham, so think Cthulhu, in an effort to stop an elder god awakening.
A great old one.
Yeah, a great old one is that what they're called, great old one. You do that quite simply by sealing or closing gates, or portals, if you like, to other realms that appear. And I'll explain a little bit about how portals appear or gates appear in a moment. You are then battling an old one, did we say?
Great old one.
A great old one. And that is represented by a sheet, and each of them have their own sort of flavour of how they're going to fuck things up for you. It might be that they make certain monsters harder, it might be that they give you penalties or disadvantages, but each of them have their own sort of unique ability.
Quirk.
It also has rules for final combat on that sheet, which we will kind of hopefully come to at some point. And at the bottom, there's something quite important called the Doom Track. And the Doom Track fills up as time goes on every time a gate opens, and each of the gods have a different number of Doom tokens that are needed to finally summon them. Yeah. So if you fill up the Doom Track, bad times.
You've got to fight it.
Yeah.
You have to fight Cthulhu. There's never a good time.
No, that never ends well. So the idea is that you stop that from happening. So that's who you're fighting, and then you will each have one, or in our case 2 investigator cards. Those investigator sheets have a little bit of narrative there about who your player is and why they're in Arkham and why they're waltzing around in the streets of a very, very disturbing place. It gives you things like your starting stats, which are sanity and stamina.
Yeah.
It might give you a bunch of items and some clues, and we'll talk about why clues are important in a minute. But also, quite importantly, at the bottom of your investigator sheet, or the second half of it, you have a series of skill sliders. Yeah. For the most part, your skill sliders your skills are fixed. So, for example, you will have on the top bar, you will have speed and stealth, and you'll have a series of numbers, and you will be able to change those skill points, if you like, during the upkeep phase. Not for everyone, but for the most part, that's kind of how it works.
You have sets of paired skills,
yeah,
and the sliders, it works on a sliding scale, so if you put speed up, your speed will conversely go down, for example.
And during the game, you will be required to make a number of attribute tests based on where your current skill slider is. Yeah. Let's walk through kind of what a turn or a round would look like. I'm going to start, not with the Mythos phase, which is actually technically first, but I'm going to start with... last.
Yeah, but you do it before you start the game.
But we'll start with movement. So... First of all, you have Arkham movement. So you'll look at your little skill slider, you'll see that your speed is 3, for example, and then you will move 3 spaces. And the game is played over a large map, and each of the map has a number of street locations and then a number of actual individual locations off the side of that.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you'll end up in an actual location rather than in the street.
Yeah, I think there's like sort of 8 distinct neighbourhoods, which all have 2 to 3 locations in each.
Yeah. So you'll move, and then if you end your movement in a location where there are any clues, which are represented by little green sort of magnifying glass tokens, you'll pick them up and collect them. It might be that in your location there is a gate, and that gate appears and will be triggered through a number of different mechanisms. But if you are in a location with a gate, you will get sucked through that gate into another world. That brings us neatly onto the second part of the movement phase, which is otherworld movement. So you either get sucked through a gate, or you get to step across from one side of the world to the other, or you get sucked back through the gate back into your original location.
Yeah, all of the other worlds, I think there's 7 or 8 off the top of my head. Each are split into 2 halves, so you move across to the left-hand side half, and then you'd move across, and then eventually move back into Arkham.
Yeah. After everyone's had their movement, you then move on to the encounters phase. So, Arkham encounters. If you're in a location, you will draw from a stack of cards. So they're all of the locations are colour-coded, and there are a relatively small stack of cards that you will shuffle and draw one. You'll then find the corresponding section with flavour text, and you'll read it out. And they're all quite thematic. So if, for example, you're in the Black Cave, it might be, you see something horrible drawn on the walls, and you need to make an attribute check, like a law check, otherwise you're going to be stuck here next turn. So maybe then we should talk about ability checks.
Yeah.
So you will look to your investigator sheet, and you will look for the appropriate stats. So it will tell you to test your law, perhaps, or your fight, or something like that. You'll see what the number is, and then there will be a modifier on that card, for example. So it might say make a law -2 check. So you take your ability, your attribute stat, minus the appropriate number of dice.
The number, and then you roll that number of dice. And it's a traditional D6.
Yeah. Successes. 5s and 6s. 5s and 6s are successes. There are some times that you can modify that, but generally speaking, 5s and 6s are successes. And then if you get the appropriate number of successes, usually it's 1, but sometimes it will say you need to have 2 successes, then you would pass that. And usually that means that nothing bad happens to you. Sometimes it means something good will happen to you.
Really, yeah.
Don't always have to have an encounter. Sometimes you can, some locations have special abilities. So, for example, the asylum, you can go and spend like an hour or 2 on the sofa with Freud and just miraculously regain all your sanity, because that's how therapy works. Or you can trade in tokens and all sorts of things. You can also attempt to seal a gate. You do that by looking at either your fight or law. You must always use fight or law to seal a gate. And you will look at the gate token that's placed on the board, look at the modifier. So if your law was 5 and the modifier was -2, you'd have 3 dice, you would need 1 success. If you manage to pass, you would then close that gate. If you then spend 5 clues, which you'll remember you can gather as you go around the board, you'll be able to seal that gate. Usually that means it's always sealed, but not always.
Well, it's an expansion thing. But yeah.
Then after all the investigators that are in Arkham have had their encounters, then we move on to otherworld encounters. And then you have a huge stack of cards. It's absolutely massive.
Level deck.
Yeah, it's like you can't hold it in your hand. And then you draw cards until you draw a card that matches one of the little coloured symbols on your otherworld location. And then you check to see if it's listed there. If it is, you read that flavour text. If not, there'll be a space for other. And usually bad stuff happens. Again, sometimes you might be asked to make an encounter, an attribute test, an attribute roll, or maybe sometimes a monster appears, or in some very, very rare occasions, a god can appear and just eat you and devour you whole. Yeah. And that's the end of that. I should point out that if you ever get devoured in this, it's not like your turn's completely done. You just get to draw a new investigator from the bad and start off.
Investigate straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't knock you out of the game as such.
So once you've then had all your encounters, you move on to the Mythos phase. So if you thought the Otherworld deck was massive, then the Mythos card deck is even larger. There's lots of information on these cards, but generally speaking, it will tell you where to put a gate. So a gate will open somewhere, in which case you take a gate token and you put it on the respective place. It will tell you where a clue appears, and you put the clue on that place. When a gate opens, you obviously need to put a doom token on the Elder One's doom track, so that you're keeping track of how soon before it wakens. And you also put a monster on that gate, sometimes multiple, depending on various complex rules. It then has a handy little series of symbols to tell you which monsters move, because monsters will move, they don't just stay where they're put. They will move across the board, they might fly off into the sky, and it tells you what direction they move in, according to using a black and white arrow system. And then you have some flavour text. And that flavour text could be something like a headline, so release 2 monsters into a particular area. It could be an environment, so for example, it's icy, so speed checks are made at a -1 penalty. Or in some horrible situations, it could be a rumour, which are incredibly difficult things that you have to do to stop bad things from happening, but ultimately sidetrack you from your main aim, which is sealing and closing gates. The payoff is, though, if you do get a rumour, generally something pleasant happens to you.
Yeah, they can be very powerful if you actually do them.
Yeah. The only thing that we haven't talked about is fighting and about monsters. So do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that?
You've got to breathe it. Yeah, so various monsters get summoned via gates or via mythos cards. Sometimes they'll just say, like, put monsters into the streets. Basically, you put all the... we use the classic sort of like car key bowl with all these monster tokens in.
No swinging with monsters.
No swinging with monsters. Basically, you put all of them in this big... in a bowl or bag, whatever you want to do, and you pull them out randomly. You place them, they will move around, and they all have different values for how frightening they are. So when you first encounter a monster, you have to make a horror check. And if you fail, you lose a certain amount of sanity.
So that's using your will, and your will is normally opposed to your fight. So you can either be really...
very brave or very fighting.
Yeah.
If you pass that and you haven't gone insane, you then fight it. And it'll have a combat rating, and then it'll have a toughness, so somewhere between 1 and 3, which is how many successes you need to kill it. The successes don't carry over, so if you fight something, you know, it's got 3 toughness and you hit it twice, next turn you've got to hit it 3 times again, all over again. If you successfully do that, you take the monster as a trophy, so you basically take it into your inventory. You can spend those on various things later on. If you fail, it does damage equal to its damage quotient. You can also sneak past monsters, so each monster's got an evade stat on the front, and that is basically where you test your sneak to either move past it, or if you're in the same space, to hide from it. A lot of them do various different things and have extra nasty things that they do and extra effects if you kill them, but there's way too much to go into.
Yeah. Just to note that some can have magical immunity, some can have physical immunity,
yeah,
and some are just absolutely fucking awful. Like the Hound of Tindalos, it doesn't move, is impossible to kill, you can't sneak past it, and if you roll a 4, 5 or a 6, it does damage to you.
Yeah, there's horrible things like that. I think what we haven't talked about is how do you win?
So, how do you win?
Very rarely is the answer.
Very rarely is the answer, although, you know, I think probably we win more now than we did when we first started playing. You have to seal or close a number of gates depending on... Well, you have to seal a number of gates depending on the number of players, but equally you can win if there are no open gates and all the gates are closed up to a certain point. If the Doom token, or the Doom tracker, fills up, or you have... lots and lots of gates open, again predetermined based on the number of players, then then it's really bad times, really. And the Elder God awakens, and the Old One awakens, and he will fight you, and it's usually exceedingly tough.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are borderline impossible to take down. There are a few. Usually the rule of thumb is if they have a very short Doom track, they're potentially killable.
Azathoth, for example, I think he's probably only got like 8 or 9.
Azathoth's the one that the game you just lose immediately.
Oh, okay,
if he
right.
fills up.
There's another one that's only got like 8 or 9, and actually the idea is you don't. You don't go and kill closed gates. You just go and tool up. Yeah. It's worth noting that there are shops, so you can go and buy magical items and common items, and also spells from the old magic shop. Yep. If you are that way inclined, or have the skills and aptitudes to cast them. But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's so much more to this, but I mean, it kind of gives you a whistle stop of what a sort of a turning around is like. There are numerous expansions for this. It is not possible to play the game with all the expansions. I think you would be there for probably about 15 days trying to do that.
Take an entire floor of your house, I think.
Yeah, I think the rule of thumb is 2 large box expansions and one of the smaller expansions.
A lot of people say that 1 big and 1 small is the limit. We play with 2 big and 1 small.
Yeah, and it's probably a little bit too much.
It's a little bit much, really. It's just, it adds a lot of rules and complexity to an already complex, janky rule system.
Yeah.
And sometimes it falls over a little bit because there's just too much going on. And there's only so much you can sort of cope with in terms of keeping rules in your head and what have you.
So, in terms of runtime, I can't imagine a game, just playing the game, not set up and stripped down, taking less than 2 hours.
No.
So we've had games that have gone 4.5, 5 hours.
5 hours before.
Yeah. So it is not a quick game to play.
It is not.
And as I said, this is out of print and unlikely to be back in print, given it's been superseded by Arkham Horror 3rd edition.
Yeah, it won't come back into print. They've got a new edition now.
Yeah.
Which we have not played.
Which we have not played, so full disclosure, we've not played it. I am somewhat tempted, perhaps more so than you.
I'm less tempted from what I've read online, but we'll get into that. I think I'd be leaping ahead a bit if I said why I didn't like it. Didn't like the idea of it.
So, what were your first thoughts when playing it?
Well, I could go back a little bit further than that. This is a very, very important one for us because this was the game that ultimately got both of us into the hobby.
Yep.
I think if you listen back to our Session 0 that we did right at the start of all this, I'd always been into sort of like miniatures games and Warhammer, Magic the Gathering a bit, and I introduced you to Magic the Gathering, and you really enjoyed that. But we'd never really done any proper sort of board gaming together.
So Magic the Gathering to this.
Well, I was about to get onto that. So I decided one day to visit a board game shop in central London.
The Orc's Nest.
Yeah, the Orc's Nest. And I don't really know what possessed me. I just, I was like, I'm going to go check this out. Like, there was no prompting of anything. And I just had a look and I was like, we just moved in together properly into our own place at the time. And I was looking at it, I just walked into this land of wonder, just these endless shelves of board games. I walked up, I thought, oh, that looks like Cthulhu, because I'm really a fan of sort of H.P. Lovecraft. I was like, oh, that looks really cool. Picked this off the shelf. I was like, okay, I'll have that. Give it a go. I brought it home, and you were a bit like, what the hell is that? That was a bit smoothie. I sat down and read the rules. And I was like, oh dear God, what have I done? But I decided to persevere, and we cracked it out. And to your credit, you jumped into it with both feet. You immediately took to it. You loved it. I mean, I think the next couple of days you were printing off flowcharts to help with the rules and stuff from work.
Good use of energy resources.
Good use of resources. And then we just got a little bit obsessed with it after that. I think we started playing it pretty much every week.
Yeah.
And then we kind of grew into the hobby from there. So this was our first and greatest love with board games.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm going to say it probably still is. There's a lot of reasons why we don't play it.
Yeah,
but
time being
the
main
one.
Main issue.
But I think it's always there on the shelf, and it's never going to get put in the
No, I will never get rid of it.
No.
Never. It means too much. It symbolises too much. And like I say, we still play it whenever we can.
So should we then crack on with the ratings?
Yeah, because I think we've got quite a lot to talk about here.
Yeah.
And obviously, these might be a little bit biased given the story that I just told you.
We fell in love with this game. Actually, I think we were in love beforehand. Otherwise, it was bolsterous moving in with you.
We had moved in together, so it'd be a bit.
Maybe I was still on the fence.
Maybe this is the thing that made you want to.
Okay, so under general, we have our first scale, or first scoring criteria, which is components.
And that includes setup and teardown.
Yeah. Well, can I just say, after playing this like 15 odd years, we now have very clearly defined tasks.
We do.
And we probably streamlined it to the best of our possible ability.
Yeah.
However...
Still takes half an hour.
At least.
That's a slight exaggeration. I don't think it takes half an hour to set off.
I think on your own it would take half an hour.
Yeah, possibly. There are an endless supply of draw decks. So you haven't just got loads of sort of big decks of cards. You've got like 20 different decks that you have to lay out to the table.
Mm-hmm. For each of your locations.
Most of the location cards you've got. Mythos deck, you've got the deck, you've got the Otherworld deck, you have Injury and Madness cards,
items,
spells,
you have allies who can join you on your travels.
There's
skills. Yeah.
I think aside from Gloomhaven, which you kind of expect with the size of the box, it's just the amount of stuff is insane. Which I know is something that they've streamlined in the third edition. But I think part of that is part of its charm.
Yes.
So I'll get onto that in a different category, I think. Yeah. But yeah, set up and tear down, particularly after a grueling 5-hour game, can be something you really don't want to do.
Yeah.
Because it does take a while, separating everything back into its piles and whatnot.
And you said this to begin with, like, you were really into miniatures. There are no miniatures with this. So these are all cardboard player tokens and standees. Lots and lots of tokens. So if we mentioned the number of cards, well, you've got twice that number in terms of tokens and different types. You've got tokens for first orders, you've got tokens for explored, you've got tokens for terror levels, which we haven't even talked about. But lots and lots of tokens.
Yes. Huge amounts of stuff.
The artwork, though, is really cool.
Yeah,
it is as you would expect for something Lovecraftian. It is thematic and horrifying. You've got tentacles all over your cards and your investigator sheets. Or, you know.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what came before this, but if you play the LCG, a lot of the artwork almost seems directly lifted from it's very much the same style. It really, really works. Some of the artwork for the Great Old Ones are really cool. Like, really, really cool.
Yeah. And I don't know whether this fits under components, but I would say that there is a huge synergy across the whole game. It's very narrative driven, and so you get flavour text, which actually is a really important part of the game and is what makes it, I think.
Yeah, it's the immersiveness of the theme that this nails in a way that I don't think anything else I've ever played has nailed. I think Nemesis is similar, comes close.
Yeah.
In terms of really diving into the theme and making you really feel like you're part of this world. And I think the components do go some way, particularly the artwork and the style and everything goes some way towards doing that. I mean, everything is functional. There's nothing deluxe in this, but I think you'd be looking at a sort of £150 package if they up the deluxeification of it in any way. I think they've obviously made a choice to completely pack this box with as much stuff as you can possibly get in there and still have a reasonable price point.
Yeah.
Which I think is a plus. And I think, thinking back to what I paid for it, I can't remember exactly what I paid for it, but it was less than £50.
Yeah.
And I think compared to some of the stuff you get for sort of 60 nowadays, I think that was an incredible deal compared to, things have moved on a bit. So yeah, I think, as always with Fantasy Flight, there's a lot of small fiddly cards, which I've never been a huge fan of. The cards for items, etc., are all very, very small, and they can be a bit fiddly, and you get a propensity to, get an elbow on them and lift them all by accident.
Yeah, and you knock all your skill sliders. I'd also say that the map itself is absolutely massive, and then with each of the bigger box expansions, you have additional maps. So we have to play this on our entire table, plus 2 chairs, plus usually another surface for cards. It is a big old table hog.
Yeah, it's the worst table hog we have in our
And even your investigators, because you will buy equipment or you will have equipment and skills and all sorts of things, they take up a huge amount of table space as well.
Yeah, you need a lot of player space as well as the board and all the stuff, like all the draw decks and everything. So yeah, unless you've got a large table, it's completely barren, etc. You'd have to play on the floor. It's just, and I think we did when we first got it. We used to play on the floor.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah.
So, all that said, how did you score it?
I gave it an 8.
Yeah, I started at an 8, but I decided to downgrade it to a 6, just because of this stripped down setup.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think it's an incredibly good package for what it used to cost. I know it's a bit irrelevant now.
Well, that's value for money, that comes on its shelf life.
Yeah, true, yeah. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm marking it up for the wrong reasons then.
It's fine. It stands.
Okay, I stick by it. I think it's a wonderful package. Again, huge amounts of affection for it, but yeah. Okay,
so I scored it a 6.
Okay, 8 for me.
Complexity. So that includes things like arguing about the rules, analysis paralysis, but also how the complexity suits the game and how well does it serve a purpose. So Al's already hinted that after we played it the first time, we were like, what the fuck is this? And we had to go online and find some wonderful person who put this fantastic flow sheet together so that we were able to work out what was supposed to happen. Because I don't think we'd even played a game that had, you know, phases within rounds, let alone splitting those phases out between Arkham and Otherworld, plus all the other shit that you have to do.
Yeah, it was
counting the numbers of monsters that are allowed on the board, number of gates. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah, This game seems to have been designed by somebody that discovered rules, and they're the best thing they ever discovered in their life, and they just wanted all of them. All of the rules. All the time, at once. It is so ridiculously over-engineered that it's almost... It pushes it into vaguely satirical ends of the spectrum. And I go past it being annoying. You know, there's enough rules and complexity to be great, and then this is just stupid. It actually goes beyond that to actually this is great again.
But I think now... I just feel like some absolute hero for knowing what rules are supposed to happen at what time, and you know,
some sort of like rules god.
Yeah, like I know what's happening. I understand.
Galaxy brain over here. Like, I know what's going on.
Yeah.
Somebody does. No. I mean, yeah, I'll be playing as much as we do. It becomes sort of secondary. But even now, there's still rules that confuse us.
And I think this is the thing. Like, we got the base game and we got the core game. Then we got one expansion, and that was great, and that was fine. But then the second big box expansion, I don't even fucking understand what happens over in like
Innsmouth.
Innsmouth. Just don't fucking go to Innsmouth.
Don't go there.
There are people patrolling the streets. There are like big bads that are going to awaken and eat you. Like, just don't go there.
Yeah, don't go to Innsmouth. But yeah, I mean, this is such a ridiculous one. If I had to draw this directly, like objectively down the middle, how well does the complexity serve the game? It's probably a 1 because it's so daft. It's so over-egged in terms of its rule set. But it makes it a unicorn. It makes it something that I've never encountered in my days of board gaming. And I kind of love it because of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I come from the school of Warhammer and reading 200-page rule books and codexes on top. Like, I know how ridiculous things can get. I kind of like it.
Yeah.
I like how much there is going on. I like how labyrinthinely complex it is.
And if you go back to that whole thing about narrative, well, actually, you know, your investigators are not, you know, well-versed in Cthulhu mythos. They are just, you know, Bob, the bank manager. I don't know what he does. He's a travelling salesman, Bob, who's just wandered into Arkham and got embroiled in all this complexity. Like, it kind of makes sense.
It makes thematic sense, yes.
You know?
And I think it's one of those things that, you know, you get very, very well-designed rules, and they create exceptional, very tight games. But as you add that sort of tightness in, you lose some of the variety, you lose some of the stupid stuff that can happen. And this has got so much going on that there's just an enormous space for the game to exist in and for things to happen. Like, people will say, like, oh, 2 games are the same. And no 2 games are the same. Like, it is always completely and utterly different. And I mean, we must have over 100 plays of this over the years, I reckon. And it's never got repetitive because it's so ridiculously over the top. So yeah, I've given it an 8.
Fair enough. I scored it a 3 because
that's fine. I am 99% of the population will be with you. I am a weirdo.
But I also think, again, you know, we have tried to teach this to other people.
I've never seen so much blank stares or people just like wandering off and not coming back at parties. I think we cracked out at a party. People were like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "Shut up!
We're playing this. It's my birthday, and we'll play what I want to play."
Get back in here before Cthulhu awakens. Yeah, it's not one to crack out at a party. No. Strange time in my life. But yeah,
I think that's fair.
This is a bonus episode. It's a ridiculous score, but I'm sticking with it because it is one of the things that I love about it.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah,
it's daft.
Okay, so our next category is shelf life, including things like value for money and replayability. So I mean, you've already said it. No two games are alike. You've got we now have, I think, probably like 12 to 16 different old ones, great ones, elder gods, whatever you want to call them.
We've got almost 20 now, and we've got about 40. I think we've got 40 investigators.
We have, we've actually even got investigators we still haven't played yet because we randomise. We randomise it every time we start. So not only do you have pretty much an infinite pool combination of investigators and big bads, but as you said, the decks are just massive.
Yeah, there's so much variety,
and so every time you turn over a card, even in like locations, because you're visiting lots of different locations to go hunting for clues, it just constantly feels fresh and it constantly is something new. There's no way that you can gamify this beyond trying to make sure your skill slide is set to the max to be able to fight whatever monster or seal a gate. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we still love it so much.
Yeah, it just never gets stale.
Yeah,
it just never got stale. I think, again, you find all these games that will have a smaller pool of characters because they are very well balanced, and I obviously respect that from a game design point of view. These characters are not even vaguely balanced. Like, they just don't give a shit. Like, some of them are absolutely useless, and some of them are just, like, gods.
Yeah.
And, again, I love that. You just don't get that anymore. Like, everything's, like, balanced. Everything must be balanced. Everything must be, like, It's just that almost guerrilla style of, like, no, this guy's absolutely useless. Good luck.
Yeah. We've said this before. Like, there is absolutely no way this game would get made today.
No, absolutely not. It would never make it through.
And I mean, I'm sure they play tested it.
Oh, I'm sure they did. I just don't think people cared as much back then. I don't know. In terms of, like, sort of quality control, I think it was just a bit looser. I think it's such a major industry now.
And I don't think it's lacking quality. Let's put it out there. It's not. But I just don't think by today's standards this
I think there'd be some exec which would
who'd be like, what the fuck is this? No.
What are you doing? Take that out. Streamline that, for goodness sake. And also, this character's completely unusable. Why is he in the box? It's an old dude that works at the observatory. Why not? It's just got such a charm because of that.
Yeah.
But, again, I'm saying this under shelf life because that's one of the things that brings me back to it so much. The characters, because the balance is out the window, the characters actually do genuinely play very, very differently.
Yeah.
I think there's one of the main issues I have with Mansions of Madness is all the characters at the end of the day just seem to play pretty much the same.
Yeah.
There wasn't that huge swinginess in it. And it adds that challenge as well, because you do get somebody that is rubbish. It's like, I'm going to have a really hard time this time. But
you have to find a function, you have to find a role within the investigators that you've got, And quite often, it's very reactive. So you can have really well laid out, clear plans.
But
you can't, because you can't get out the door because there's a horrendous hound of Tyndall sat in front of you, and all you've got is some holy water, which, by the way, is not going to do the job.
I mean, it is endlessly replayable. In terms of value for money, a kind of a moot point with it being out of print as it always is. Yeah, but for what I paid for it, it was exceptional value. Yeah. Really, really good value.
So how did you score it?
9.
I gave it a 10.
Yeah.
And I gave it a 10 because if it weren't for the time factor, I probably still would pull this out at least every couple of weeks, I reckon.
Yeah, same. Yeah, which is saying something.
Yeah. And then, fun. So, is it any fun?
Yes, it is an enormous amount of fun. I think the thing that's always stood out to me above everything else is we often talk about emergent storytelling. This is the king of that. And I feel like I've been chasing the dragon ever since.
Yeah.
The stories that this game manages to create through the system of the characters that you play, the situations they find themselves in, what's on the cards, but also what's not on the cards. There's so many over the years, like we still regularly refer to.
We have house rules. The only time we've ever house ruled something based on a narrative story. So if any of our investigators get devoured, that's fine, but you have to get a Bob out.
Yes, because Bob is champion.
Yeah.
Bob is, for whatever reason, whenever anybody uses Bob, he just ends up getting distracted and delayed everywhere. He gets distracted by everything
until such a time as he doesn't, and then he comes out like all guns blazing and
cleans
the house, completely wins the game. We don't have any other house rules really that we play.
No, just that one.
That one.
Bob has to come out. None with a gun.
None with a
There's
gun.
a nun character, and whenever we play with her, we make it our mission to get her absolutely tooled up, usually with a flamethrower and machine gun, which is always good fun, and she just seems to do incredibly well in combat.
Yeah.
There are so many memories and stories we've got from this game that the only thing that comes close to it is Nemesis for me.
And even then, I don't think it's a patch on this.
No, because there isn't the variety there. There's Nemesis is quite contained. That just anything can happen in this, and you never know.
And we've talked about how narratively driven the whole game is, but not only do your investigators have flavour text, your cards obviously contribute a huge amount to the theme of it, and you sit and take the time to read it all because it's just so all-encompassing, and you want to find out and you want to know. Even the monsters on them, like the monsters on the back of them, will have a quote from the text from the original material, and it's just really cool.
It's awesome. And there's no right or wrong way to do things either. It's such a wide open play space that yes, you need to do things and you should be doing things, but if you don't, you can still have fun.
And you quite often as well, you're up against it, and you don't always win, and quite often you will lose, and actually there's a sense of camaraderie in it that I don't think I've had with other games. There's
this constant sense of sort of like gallows, I don't know if you call it gallows humour, but that kind of side of things where you just you're screwed. May as well have fun on the way down, kind of thing. It's just. And I think everything in the game, particularly around sort of like combat, things like that, winning is so unlikely that when you do actually pull off a real like clutch moment thing just out of sheer blind luck, it's amazing. Like we've had unarmed people go up against these hideous monsters with their fists before, and for some reason we rolled 3 6s on an attack roll, and they've done it. Likewise, you've had people dying to cultists, which are the easiest monsters in the game. So it's just that variety and that swinginess of it, and that crazy complexity that I just find so much fun.
Yep.
I don't think I would change much of it. Some of the expansion stuff I'm a bit like,
but we've talked about this, and I think it's too much effort now at this point to strip out. We're going to have to spend like another 6 to 12 hours stripping out expansion stuff. But I think again we went all in and we were so excited by it. I don't think we necessarily thought just because we can does that mean you should.
Yeah, exactly. No, you shouldn't.
No, you shouldn't. Is the actual.
But I don't think that takes away from the core experience.
No.
That's just that's an us issue of putting too many expansions, isn't there, really? You got anything else to say around fun?
No.
Yeah, so I am going to give it a 10.
Yeah, I also gave it a 10.
Yeah, it is unbelievably good fun.
Lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So if we top up all the scores, we get a total and average it out, as we always do. That gets us a general rating of 8, which I am very pleased by.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So then on to our 2-player ratings, and the first of our 2-player ratings is Table Talk and / Getting to Know You.
Mm-hmm. So I played a lot of co-ops. The chatter is constant.
Yeah.
It's never ending. You're constantly talking about what's happened. You're constantly talking about what you're going to do. You're constantly joking about the stupidity of it all. You're scratching your heads together, trying to work out rules. It is a non-stop interaction. There is no AP. There's no sitting in silence and working out what you're going to do. It just doesn't happen in this game. No. It's just bang, 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 bang.
You start the round by planning out roughly what it is that you're going to do, and then get fucked up along the way.
Yeah.
And you have to make plans on the hoof. You're despairing together as well, I think.
Obviously, yeah. There's constant reading of cards to each other. It's just a never-ending stream of interactivity.
Yeah. And I would say that there is an awful lot of reading to each other, but it never gets old.
No, because you're so invested in what the other person's reading.
Yeah.
You know, what's happening. I don't know if there's much else to say on the subject. I don't know why it manages to do it in such a way that no other game I've discovered has. But in terms of getting to know somebody, this is just perfect.
Yeah.
If they don't run away screaming when you pull the rule book out, which is how I knew you were the one.
Yeah, probably not a first date board game.
No.
Probably not even a 12th date
No,
board game.
No. Probably do what I did and wait till they move in with you and then spring.
I've just signed a tenancy agreement for at least a year. Maybe
yeah,
got a
now
baby
you're
on
doing
the
this
way.
for the next year. But yeah, I've given it a second 10.
So I gave it an 8.
Okay.
Why did I give it an 8? Because I don't think there is a huge amount of getting to know you. Whilst there's a lot of talking, whilst there's a lot of interaction, I don't think I necessarily learnt that this is how you strategise or anything like that. And I had also just given it 2 10s, and I felt I couldn't give it another 10.
Yeah, I mean, getting to know you as a game player, perhaps less, but getting to know somebody as a person, humour.
Yeah, maybe.
How they deal with constant barrage of like shitty stuff happening,
like shit.
Or
they deal with just getting devoured.
If somebody's a bad loser, that you will find that quite quickly in this game because you are constantly pummeled with things that are completely outside of your control, and some people cannot handle that. So yeah, no, I stick by it.
All right, fair enough. And then competitive / or in this case co-op. So our co-op rating. So. Yeah, you are absolutely in it together, and you are absolutely working together in quite a coordinated fashion. What I will say is there is still an element of you playing as a solo investigator, because it's not like you can fight monsters together. So when you've got something really, really horrible on the board, you can't necessarily go and fight them together. And when you've got some of the masked monsters, for example, you still have to do it on your own because obviously successes don't carry across. You can't necessarily share things like clues, for example, which we did a long time.
Yeah, you can't trade clues, but you can trade everything else.
Yeah, so there is an element of you are still an individual player, but I think the upside of that is quarterbacking is almost completely impossible.
Yeah, you can't quarterback this at all.
I don't even know how you would even begin to try. You could say, well, go there and do this, but I mean that's not.
Nah.
You can't
Who knows
engineer.
what that is?
Yeah, you can't engineer what card is going to come up. So there is a huge amount of free choice and still that option. To be an individual and play your own game.
Yeah, but I think what makes us truly cooperative is there is a very clear end goal. If you go back to the granddaddy of co-ops, it reminds me a little bit of Pandemic in a way, because you all have these different characters, they have their roles, but everything you're doing needs to serve the greater good of winning the game.
Yeah.
If somebody decides to just nope out of that, you're probably going to lose quicker than otherwise, because you need to be. There's only so many clues on the board; they do run out. You need to be very careful about who is doing what and what their end game is. If you don't plan that, at least, like, oh, okay, I've got this amount of clues, I'm going to go and try and seal that game. If you don't plan ahead like that, and you don't work together, not so necessarily together doing the same thing, but together in the great bigger picture, it all falls apart.
Yeah, but does it? Because actually there have been so many times where we've had characters that, for want of happenstance, like where they've ended up in their situation, they are just swanning around the board doing diddly squat.
But I think that's also been a conscious choice between the two of us. It's like, oh, this person can't really achieve anything, let's not...
Yeah.
Let them go off on monster duty or so. That's usually the punishment we send the characters off on when they're not doing anything actually valuable. Go hunt monsters. Die or do not. With
your crucifix and your your map.
Yeah, with your butcher's knife and a hope. But I think we slip into you as a character, not as a player, but your characters slip into roles depending on the situation of what's happened on the board, and I think you have to keep readjusting that interactivity between the characters. Going, okay, so and so is doing this, so and so is doing that. Again, like we said a couple of times, we play double-handed on this, so we play 2 characters each. But all 4 of those characters need to, as much as possibly, be working in concert, because if they don't, things will fall apart.
Yeah.
And often you'll get a character that does get a bit tooled up and is quite good at combat, so you send them off to sort of rescue other players so they can move around and do what they need to do, which is usually the business of sealing gates or stockpiling weapons or magic items. And you have money, so you get a character that gets surprisingly rich that might meet up with another one going, here you go, here's some money. I think there's a great deal of cooperability in this, huge amounts, and I think the game punishes you for not doing it. Because I think when we first started playing, we used to play much more individualistically, but as we started to understand the mechanism of the game, we knew that you can't do that and win.
And actually, the game forces you to ignore the main goal. So all the stuff that it does is it's like, why don't you go and have some side stories?
It loves to distract you with
It loves to distract you. And so side stories are these things that are so
expansion.
It's an expansion. Yeah. So these are for each of the investigators. They have these little narrative stories that you have to go and accomplish, and usually spend clues in locations in order to get a really great reward. And it's shiny, and you want to go and do it. And
loves to distract you with side quest.
Yeah.
It loves the side quest. If you go on any of the side quests, you are fucked.
Pretty much. Missions are these things that you can get from shops instead of actual helpful, useful things like, I don't know, a shotgun. You can go on a mission and spend clues in particular locations in a particular order in order for you to get some sort of kind of reward.
Some on the shiny.
But in the meantime, like, 6 gates have opened and you've all been devoured.
On the trip. Yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think this is exceptional. It's not as tight as something like Pandemic.
But also then, that's the whole point, though. Quarterbacking is absolutely rife in something like Pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you have one person sit there and orchestrate everything.
Yeah, there's a clear route to victory a lot of the time. Like,
I mean, there's a clear route to definite failure.
Yeah. Where this is a lot more open, but I don't think it makes it less of a stellar co-op.
Yeah, no, I don't think I was necessarily criticising it. I think there's still that element of individuality within your play that means there is no quarterbacking. That keeps that sandboxy feel to it, because there is quite sandboxy.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a sandbox.
But whilst you are still definitely all failing together.
Yeah, all failing together.
So how did you rate it?
9.
Yeah, 9.
So, okay, cool. Right, this is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Scalability. So how well does this play at 2, and how much does it miss other people around the table? I'm going to split this into 2 things for me. Rules as written, and mechanisms, and practicality.
Yeah.
So rules as written, you play 1 character each, and this game is nigh and impossible to win at 2.
Have we played it at 2? I think we have.
We did. We started out playing it as 2, but we quickly graduated to 2 characters each. I think we did. We started off doing the Pandemic thing of a shared character that just wasn't really working. A third shared character, and then we just went, screw it, let's just play 2 each.
Can I just interrupt just to say part of the reason why 4 is a good play number is because victory conditions are based on the number of investigators that you have, monster limits, so there can only be a certain number of monsters on the board, again based on your number of investigators, and other factors as well. There's
a lot of scaling that goes on depending on the player count, like a lot of things mathematically change depending on how many players in the game. And 2 is horrifically punishing.
And the board is large, bearing in mind, in order to move 3 spaces, for a lot of your investigators, you're going to have to max out your speed in order to be able to traverse that kind of range of distance. Yeah. So, you'll have spent about 5 turns just trying to gather enough clues to seal a gate before,
And I think the kicker comes in that at the end of every turn, you get a mythos card. And that mythos card doesn't scale at all, depending on how many players there are.
No.
And the mythos cards are nigh on almost always brutal.
Yeah.
And if you're playing with 2, you have 2 turns, you get a mythos. 2 turns, mythos. Playing with 4, you get 4 turns of mythos. 4 turns of mythos. It is not mechanically designed to be played with 2 characters.
Yeah.
2 players, however, playing multiple characters, I feel is the sweet spot. Because the issue with this, if you get more people around the table, and we played this with 5 before, but I played it at 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The length is ridiculous.
Yeah. Not to mention the learning.
Yeah, I mean, you try and teach this and play a 5-player game, you're going to be there for 10 hours.
I think even our most dedicated of our board game friends...
Eyes glazed over.
And can get his head around it.
Yeah, he was a little bit much.
Yeah.
So, it's a tricky one, because does it need more players? I think definitely not. In fact, I think it hurts it. Does it need more characters per player? Yes, if you're going to play it with 2. So I've given it a 7 because of that. I think if it played just as well at 2 characters as it did at 4, I would have given it a 10, because you don't need more people at all. But it doesn't. And sometimes taking on multiple characters, it can be way too much for some people.
Yeah. I scored it an 8, kind of for the same sort of reasons, but mainly because it is lightning in a bottle, and I wish that we could share it with more people.
Yeah,
you know, rather than I don't think it works perfectly as it is, and in some ways I think it is absolutely perfect. The fact there's two of us, because again we've played it for such a long time, trying to introduce somebody new to it, it's just it's not going to work. No. It's never going to work.
No, it's our game, isn't it?
It is our game, and I imagine anyone else who's played it and loves it probably has very similar feelings. It's just not something you can crack out. But I do wish that I could. That's not. But there are lots of reasons why we can't, and you know.
Yeah, but yeah, I think it's a tricky one. It is a tricky one, but I think 7 is where I'm at.
Yeah, so I scored it an 8.
Okay, right. So if we add those up and average out, that gives us an 8.5, and as always we round, and that gives us our first 2-player 9 rating, which I'm very happy about, because this is near and dear to both of our hearts.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I guess is a bit irrelevant now. I don't know how easy it is to get hold of a copy of this, but if you are a board game lifer as such and you've never tried it, I would recommend picking up a copy and giving it a go, even just for the experience, because maybe there are things like this out in the market. If there are, please do let us know, but I've never found anything else quite like it. It's very unique.
It is the game that got us started.
And it's still
one of our absolute favourites. It's an absolute stellar game, and I definitely think every board gamer should play it at least once.
Definitely.
So that's it from us. We have our socials. Come over and give us a like. If you would like to leave a review on the podcast, that would be awesome and very much appreciated. But until next time, be good to each other and play lots of games.